So Joe Biden is expected to name his running mate within the coming days, and one of them is facing some scrutiny for eulogizing a communist.
Joining us now to talk Veep stakes are Inez Stepman, senior policy analyst with the Independent Women's Forum, and former senior advisor to the Sanders campaign and author of T.O. to Bernie, Chuck Rocha.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah,
how's it going?
Good to be good.
All right, so let me start with this Karen Bass oppo dump. There have been a few iterations of this over the past few days. The latest one, Chuck, is a sort of guilt by association. She gave a eulogy at the funeral of a Communist Party leader, and this has been written up in Politico as a, damning story for her. Just what's your reaction to all of this?
I think that if you're a white man and you're talking about this, I wish you would all just sit down and let this process play out. I've been sitting back and watching this and watching both sides. There are people within our party who want her, people who are talking about Senator Harris, people that are talking about Rice. I think we just have to sit back and kind of chill out for just a minute. But let's talk about the communist thing for just 1 second. I would remind everybody that I think we're a little bit past that in American politics, so much so that Bernie Sanders in Florida said something nice about Castro and about the education system down there and still won Cubans in the Democratic primary. I remind you all of that. And I also need the one thing that Joe Biden needs is he needs to get African American up to what it was for Obama and for Hillary. Keep Latinos at least the same level. He really should increase that some. But if you take and increase the, let's say the Miami Cuban support for Joe Biden or for Donald Trump by 10 points, that equates to just half a point of black turnout. So you've got to kind of pick and choose where you want to fight this. That's the only group in America electorally that make any difference on this one issue who makes them rampant, and it should. By all means, it should. But it's that small little group of Cubans down there who've already made up their mind, bottom line.
So, Inez, I want to get your thoughts on this, on the Karen Bass communist eulogy issue, because you've written a lot about this issue with your parents, fleeing communist Poland from behind the Iron Curtain, and there's a deep antipathy to communism in the Republican Party, I think with good reason. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on it from that perspective.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree that this is probably not going to be a major electoral issue, especially in an election where there's a pandemic, where there are riots in the streets. I mean, I think it's not going to be a major point of the election. I do think that among Americans who have family who fled communist, either in my case, communist Poland or communist Cuba, I do think there is a deep antipathy, especially in the immigrants themselves, and then the first generation like me. I do think we're seeing that fading as as essentially as they families like this assimilate more into American culture and go to American public schools, which no longer teach a lot of the evils of communism. I do think I think it's a bad thing that we're moving away from that understanding, but I do agree that we are moving away from that understanding, and I'm not sure that this issue is going to last beyond the news cycle.
Well, and here's the thing that drives me crazy about this, Inez, is that by and large, the media discussion of these vice presidential potential picks has been entirely surface level. It's been, mostly on biography, sort of branding exercises. We saw Stacey Abrams with the glossy profile. She's been able to brand herself as a progressive, even though she really wasn't a progressive in terms of how she governed in Georgia. We're talking about Kamala Harris, again, from an identity and from a biography perspective, and the idea that this kind of guilt by association would be more important and more significant for the media to dig into than, say, Kamala Harris's criminal justice record, the fact that she let Steve Mnuchin off the hook, the fact that she tried to criminalize parents for their kids not showing up to school, that she went after low-level marijuana offenders, the actual details of how they would govern. Susan Rice, also on foreign policy, what is that going to look like? The fact that that's been basically absent from the conversation in favor of these kind of guilt by association attacks is what to me is so outrageous and frustrating about this.
Well, I'll say two things. First, we know it's going to be a woman of color, right? That's why we're talking about the same 4 or 5 people. So that is already the victory of identity politics. We're not talking about the individual qualifications of a whole bunch of different people. And to your point, policy-wise, about a whole bunch of different Veep picks and who they could be, we've narrowed it down because there have already been declarative statements from Joe Biden and from the campaign saying, I must pick a woman of color. I find these kinds of statements very condescending as a woman, that it must be a woman or it must be, but we know that because the identity politics side, sorry, Crystal, I think the identity politics side of the party is essentially winning. And I think that the
Corey
party
Bush would tell you
establishment, the
otherwise.
Democratic Party, the establishment of the Democratic Party has decided that they can replace some of the, I think, the economic issues that you're more enthusiastic about from the left. It can kind of gin up the base or get people enthusiastic by pushing even more on identity politics, on wokeism, on that side of sort of the Democratic Party base issues. And that leaves them of the need, for example, to ask real questions about corporate America, which, by the way, corporate America is all behind wokeism as well, perhaps for some of the same reasons.
What do you say to that, Chuck?
You know, I was sitting back and thinking about it. The press just always, and this is going to shock you, Crystal, please stay in your seat, always just gets this wrong, right? Like, it's just like we obsess over the stupid things, and not that everything is stupid, but like you said, when you get down to the core, as a strategist, actually as somebody here who's run campaigns every single day, somebody who's out there talking to people. I just got through with focus groups with Latinos in North Carolina, right? They're not asking where somebody went to college and who gave what speech. They're asking who's going to give me health care. They're like, look, we don't like Donald Trump. Don't tell me again why he's bad, because we hate him. But tell me what Joe Biden is going to do for us. This vice president's got to say what they have done in their past via policy and what they're going to do for all working Americans, to be honest with you, black, brown, white. Like, that's what's on people's mind today. But the media is obsessed with this beauty contest, with what somebody did back then, because they think it sells papers and clicks on the internet.
So, Chuck, on that issue of kind of the Hispanic outreach and meeting those voters where they're at, we were talking earlier about Joe Biden's attempts to do that kind of outreach in Texas. There's the always evergreen Democrat aspiration that they can flip Texas. But what do you say to how they're doing? Have you observed that, and how's it going?
Well, I think that it's going better than it was. And I think the pandemic was a big stumble for them, because it's hard to build something out when everybody's having to stay home. I think that there are going to be other organizations that help Biden run his campaign. Nuestro PAC, like, I have run more Spanish language TV than the Biden campaign with Nuestro PAC. So I think at the presidential level, there's going to be enough money spent talking to Latinos through a lens of what they care about. Like, how will Joe Biden make your health care better? Well, how's Joe Biden going to affect your student debt? Like, things like, we're going to have that conversation whether Joe Biden is having it or not. What I really worry about is the congressional races and the Senate races and the state house races, because I don't see anybody in those neighborhoods talking to Latinos or calling Latinos or spending any amount of money like we did with Tio Bernie in the primary, distinguishing what it really means to elect somebody you care about who's going to do something for you. Joe Biden needs to be telling Latinos every day, this is how I'm going to make your life better, because that's what they want to hear right now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. All right, guys, stick with us. We're going to have more with our panel just after this.